Imagine, you run a farm, right? And you suddenly have this massive rat infestation in your barn.
Oh, yeah. Total nightmare.
Right, so you need a quick fix. You bring in like a dozen feral cats. Within a week, the rats are entirely gone. You pat yourself on the back for a job well done.
Naturally. Problem solved.
But then, a month later, you realize the cats, well, they ran out of rats, so they've eaten all your chickens.
Yeah. There it is.
And now they're aggressively breeding in the hayloft. Like, you solved the immediate crisis, but the mechanism you used to solve it created a structural disaster that is honestly far more expensive to fix.
That farm dynamic is, it's a perfect illustration of the trap. I mean, we're naturally wired to just stop analyzing the exact moment the immediate pain goes away.
Right, because the rats are gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The brain releases dopamine, it signals success. We don't naturally run the tape forward to see what those cats can do next.
Well, welcome to this custom deep dive. We put this together specifically for you, and today we are going straight into a stack of strategic foresight guides, cognitive model briefings, and systems analysis articles to master a really crucial mental discipline.
Yeah, second-order thinking.
Second-order thinking. It entirely revolves around the hidden art of asking one deceptively simple question, and then what? Okay, let's unpack this. The goal today isn't to get bogged down in abstract academic theories.
Right. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. We are building a practical toolkit to help you avoid introducing feral cats into your own business or life.
And honestly, mastering this shifts you from linear, immediate problem solving to seeing the hidden web of consequences that dictate long-term success.
It's like moving from playing checkers, where you just look at the next jump, to playing chess.
Where you're visualizing the board 5 moves ahead.
Exactly.
But to understand how to think in the second order, we first have to isolate why our brains are so stubbornly locked in the first order. Based on the cognitive research in our sources, it all comes down to how we perceive time. Time is the ultimate variable here. It completely obscures causality. First-order thinking is strictly linear and instantaneous. You have an action, you get a result.
Like you have a headache, you take a pill, the headache fades.
Right. Because the feedback loop is instant, the brain easily connects the cause and the effect. First-order solutions are, entirely focused on immediate gratification or just symptom relief.
And the sources provide a really specific temporal mapping exercise to break out of that instant gratification loop. They call it the 10-10-10 rule.
That's a great tool.
It forces you to evaluate the impact of a decision across 3 distinct horizons. So in 10 minutes, in 10 months, and in 10 years.
Applying those 3 horizons is necessary because it forces you to account for what systems analysts call the time lag.
The time lag.
Yeah, when you map out the consequences of a decision over time, it rarely looks like a straight line. It usually forms an S-curve.
Okay, an S-curve. Walk me through that.
So the impact stays flat and seemingly invisible for a long period, the latency phase before suddenly spiking upward exponentially. Because of that flat latency period, the bill for a bad decision often comes due long after the original cause has been completely forgotten.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a stark business case study in the sources that illustrates this perfectly. Let's look at a CEO who decides to slash the company's research and development budget to hit, like, a quarterly profit target.
That is classic first-order optimization. Let's run it through that 10-10-10 framework.
Okay.
In 10 minutes, or at the immediate earnings call, the CEO is heralded as a genius. The balance sheet looks pristine because expenses dropped instantly, while revenue from old products remained steady.
Right, but then we hit the 10-month mark, and the product pipeline is getting a bit thin. Maybe some of the top engineers have quietly left because there's just no funding for new projects.
Exactly, but the legacy products are still carrying the weight, so the underlying decay is completely ignored.
And then we hit 10 years.
Right. The S-curve spikes, but in the negative direction. The company has been completely hollowed out. Competitors have leapfrogged the technology.
Wow.
But the most insidious part of the time lag is the loss of institutional knowledge. You can't just turn R&D back on and catch up because the people who knew how to innovate are gone.
And because a decade has passed, the current leadership will probably just blame changing market conditions, right, or bad luck, rather than correctly identifying that the R&D cut 10 years ago was the terminal disease.
Spot on.
Okay, I hear the logic there, but I have to push back a little on the application.
Go for it.
Doesn't second-order thinking run the risk of turning you into a paralyzed overthinker? I mean, if I'm constantly asking, and then what, for every single variable, I'm tracing butterfly effects until I literally can't make a decision.
What's fascinating here is that the cognitive models actually anticipate that exact operational failure. If you trace consequences endlessly, you fall into a state of infinite regress.
Infinite regress.
Yeah. The human brain simply cannot compute infinite variables, which leads to decision paralysis. So to prevent this, the sources mandate a strict three-layer cap.
Wait, meaning you literally force yourself to stop looking ahead after the third consequence?
Exactly. You only trace consequences first, second, and third layers deep. Layer 1 is the immediate event. Layer 2 is the direct reaction of the system to that event.
Okay.
And Layer 3 is how the broader ecosystem adjusts to that reaction. You stop there because anything beyond the third layer just devolves into speculative noise.
That makes sense.
The mathematical rule of thumb is to halt your analysis when the probability of a consequence drops below 10%. If a fourth-order effect only has an 8% chance of happening, factoring it into your primary decision matrix actually degrades your accuracy. You cap the analysis to preserve your ability to execute.
That structural cap makes it really practical. But even if we perfectly map out the 10-month and 10-year horizons, we still run into a massive behavioral hurdle. The sources show that executing a second-order strategy often feels terrible in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. The neurology of decision-making explains that paradox perfectly. Often, the mathematically optimal long-term decision registers in the human brain as a massive, immediate mistake.
So we have to clearly separate first-order pain for second-order gain from first-order gain for second-order pain.
Yes.
Let's break those down. First-order gain for second-order pain is basically the sugar rush. Eating junk food, taking on a high-interest debt, or bailing out a fundamentally broken department.
Right. You get the immediate dopamine hit of relief, but you are actively engineering a systemic crisis for tomorrow.
Contrast that with strategic mastery, which requires enduring first-order pain to unlock compounding second-order gain. Think of initiating a grueling corporate culture shift, or like firing a toxic top performer.
Yeah, the immediate result is chaos, pushback, a massive drop in morale. The first-order feedback screams that you made a mistake.
Okay.
But that friction is required to yield the compounding benefits later.
But the friction isn't always distributed evenly, which complicates things further. When looking at the organizational dynamics in the research, there's a concept called the cost-bearer versus benefit-receiver gap.
That gap is where most corporate strategies actually fail. The person making the decision and reaping the immediate reward is rarely the same person who absorbs the long-term cost.
It's like a relay race, where the first runner sprints so recklessly that they tear a hamstring, hands off a bloody baton to the next runner, and then takes credit for an incredibly fast split time.
Wow. Yes.
The first runner gets the applause and the promotion, but the overall team is now guaranteed to lose the race.
And the incentive structure practically encourages tearing the hamstring. Take an executive who implements a strict new software protocol to streamline their own department's budget.
Okay, first-order gain is a saved $1 million.
Right. But the second-order effect is that they've essentially shifted a massive, invisible administrative burden onto the operations team, slowing down the entire supply chain.
So what does this all mean for you when you're in the trenches? How do you distinguish between the immediate discomfort that signals you're making a genuine mistake versus the discomfort that just means you are enduring the necessary friction of growth?
You have to separate structural failure from muscle burn. Discomfort that signals a mistake usually means you are violating a core principle, an ethical baseline, or basic system physics.
Like the math just doesn't work.
Exactly. If a decision feels wrong because the math simply doesn't add up, that's a mistake. But discomfort that signals growth, the muscle burn, feels hard simply because it requires immense effort, confrontation, or unpopularity. If it's just socially or physically exhausting, but the underlying logic is sound, you push through.
Right. But mapping out our own pain and gain thresholds only covers half the board. The system still fails if we forget one crucial variable: human rebellion.
Oh, yes.
We aren't moving lifeless chess pieces. We are interacting with highly adaptive, rational actors who will aggressively optimize their behavior to meet whatever new rules we set.
Which introduces Goodhart's law to the framework. The principle states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
The sources dive into the psychology of why this happens. It's not necessarily malicious, right? It's biological optimization.
Yeah, humans are wired to conserve energy. We naturally seek the path of least caloric and cognitive resistance to achieve a stated reward.
Take the classic example of a school district that decides to evaluate and reward its teachers strictly based on standardized test scores. The explicit goal is to improve education. The metric is the test score.
And the first-order result is exactly what they wanted. The test scores go up, the policy looks unassailable on paper.
But when we ask, and then what?
Mhm.
We see the biological optimization at work. Memorizing answers burns far fewer cognitive calories than fostering genuine critical thinking.
Right.
So the curriculum narrows entirely to rote memorization. The incentive structure inadvertently rewarded test-taking mechanics while destroying the unmeasured spirit of actual education.
We all know the classic historical anecdote of the Cobra effect in British India, but the sources break down the underlying mathematical flaw in the incentive structure that makes it so relevant.
Yeah, the British government wanted to reduce the venomous cobra population in Delhi, so they offered a cash bounty for every dead snake.
The fundamental flaw was an economic arbitrage opportunity that the government failed to anticipate. Initially, people hunted wild cobras, but rational actors quickly realized the payout for a dead cobra was significantly higher than the cost of feeding and breeding a captive one.
So they optimized the system, they built cobra farms, they mass-produced the exact problem the government was paying them to eliminate.
And the third order effect is where the system completely breaks down. The government discovers the farms and cancels the bounty program.
And then what?
Well, the breeders, now holding thousands of venomous snakes that cost money to feed and hold zero market value, simply release them into the streets. The population of wild cobras ended up significantly higher than before the intervention.
The cobra effect perfectly highlights the necessity of Chesterton's fence. This is a systems thinking rule stating that you should never tear down a fence or remove a legacy rule or structure until you fully understand the second order reasoning behind why it was built in the first place.
Yeah, you might look at a bureaucratic process and think it's just friction, but it might actually be the barrier keeping the metaphorical cobras out.
People often remove the friction to optimize speed, only to discover the friction was functioning as a crucial emergency brake. Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources also warn us about reinforcing loops.
Oh, those are dangerous.
Yeah. This is when the consequence of your actions circles back and exponentially amplifies the original state. This can be positive, like the viral network effect of a new software platform, but it can also trigger a total systemic death spiral.
The permanent price war is the textbook death spiral. Imagine you run a retail company and you introduce a massive 50% discount to hit a short-term quarterly revenue target. First order effect sales spike.
But the second order effect is that you've anchored your customers to a deeply discounted valuation. They will now refuse to buy at full price.
Exactly. And the third order effect is the reinforcing loop. Your competitors see your market share grab, so they retaliate by slashing their own prices.
Oh, no.
Right. Now, to maintain your volume, you have to discount further. The loop reinforces itself until the entire industry has permanently destroyed its profit margins and no one can afford to innovate.
Okay, so if people are biologically driven to game metrics and actions can spiral into reinforcing loops so easily, how do we ever introduce a new initiative without triggering our own Cobra effect?
We rely on a mathematical model called probabilistic branching. When mapping out the second-order effects, you don't just plan for a single most likely reaction. You build a decision tree with weighted probabilities and calculate the expected value.
So rather than saying if we drop our prices, competitors won't react, you map the percentages.
Let's run the math on the price drop. You analyze the market and assign a 60% probability that competitors ignore your discount. In that branch, you gain $1 million in new revenue.
Okay.
But you assign a 40% probability that they retaliate and trigger a price war. In that branch, you lose $2 million.
See, most people would just look at the 60% chance of success and jump in, assuming the odds are in their favor.
Which is a catastrophic mathematical error. You have to calculate the total expected value. A 60% chance of gaining $1 million gives you a positive expected value of $600,000.
Right.
But a 40% chance of losing $2 million gives you a negative expected value of $800,000. When you combine the branches, your decision to drop prices actually has a net negative expected value of $200,000.
Wow.
Probabilistic branching forces you to weigh the severity of the second-order consequence, not just the likelihood.
The math makes perfect sense, but it relies on an incredibly dangerous assumption that we are actually capable of assigning objective probabilities. I mean, when I'm pushing a project I really care about, my optimism bias completely warps the numbers. I'll subconsciously assign an 80% chance of success just because I want it to work.
Oh, sure. The amygdala naturally filters out data that threatens our goals. If you sit around a conference table and ask, what could go wrong? The brain perceives that question as an attack on the plan and immediately adopts a defensive posture. downplaying the risks.
So how do we bypass that?
The sources recommend a technique called inversion, specifically running a pre-mortem.
Okay, so instead of doing a postmortem where everyone points fingers after the project crashes, you do it before you even sign the budget.
Exactly. The framing is what makes it work neurologically. You don't ask what might go wrong. You jump 18 months into the future and state as an absolute objective fact, the project has failed spectacularly. It is a complete disaster. Why did it fail?
By stating it as a fact, you bypass the brain's defensive response. It's no longer a threat to the plan, it's a puzzle to be solved. You're basically writing your own project's obituary.
Yeah, the brain shifts from defense to diagnostics. It gives your ego permission to surface all the negative second-order effects that you were previously ignoring. You work backward from the failure to identify the hidden vulnerabilities in your current strategy.
So think about a major decision or initiative you are facing right now. If you jump forward a year and look at the obituary of that decision, what killed it? Did a competitor outflank you? Did you run out of capital?
And this is, did it fail because it was actually too successful?
Wait, really? Success-induced failure?
Yes. It's a massive blind spot
Mm-hmm.
because our optimism bias refuses to view success as a threat. You must ask the pre-mortem question, what breaks if this works perfectly?
Let's say your marketing campaign goes viral. You project a modest 10% growth, but instead demand spikes by 500% overnight.
First-order result, euphoric success.
Yep.
You sold out of everything. But let's trace the cascade. Second-order effect, your supply chain shatters under the unpredicted load. You don't have the materials, the factory hours, or the shipping logistics to fulfill the orders. Your customer support team is drowning in angry emails they can't answer.
And the third order effect is catastrophic brand damage. Thousands of new customers experience massive delays, terrible service, and leave scorched earth reviews. Your perfect success destroyed your reputation.
Right. If you run the pre-mortem and assign even a 20% probability to success-induced failure, you realize you need a modular supply chain strategy before you launch the marketing campaign. You build the capacity to scale customer service dynamically. You cap daily sales to control the flow.
Okay, so we've run the pre-mortem, we've mapped the probabilities, we've checked the systems for cobra effects, and we make the call. But how do we actually track if our second-order intuition is getting any sharper? Because if you ask my memory, I'm a strategic oracle who predicts the market perfectly every time.
The human memory is entirely unreliable for calibrating strategy due to hindsight bias. The moment a complex event unfolds, the brain immediately rewrites our memory of our past predictions to reduce cognitive dissonance.
We convince ourselves that the outcome was inevitable and that we knew it all along, even when we were entirely blind to it.
We edit the tape to make ourselves look smarter in retrospect.
Exactly.
Which is why the only way to genuinely improve this cognitive muscle is by maintaining a strict decision journal, sometimes referred to as a prediction log.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. What exactly goes into the log?
Before you finalize a high-stakes decision, you physically write down the parameters. You document your expected first-order result. Crucially, you write down your projected second and third-order effects, you attach a specific timestamp, and you assign a numerical confidence level.
Give me an example.
Like, I have an 80% confidence level that within 6 months, competitor X will retaliate by dropping their price by 10%. Then, you set a calendar reminder for 6 months to open the journal and audit the entry against reality.
I see the utility, but isn't it incredibly humbling to open a journal a year later and realize your intricate probabilistic branching was completely wrong? It feels like a guaranteed way to punch your own ego in the face.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that temporary embarrassment is the active ingredient of neuroplasticity. Confronting your documented errors is the only mechanism to calibrate your intuition.
Because you can't rely on hindsight bias to smooth over the mistakes anymore. The ink is right there on the page.
When you look at the journal and see that a second-order consequence completely blindsided you, you identify your recurring analytical blind spots. You learn how your specific industry actually reacts to stress.
Right.
The sting of being objectively wrong is the feedback loop that trains your brain to look deeper and model systems more accurately the next time.
It's the muscle burn of strategy. So let's pull all these threads together for you. To escape the trap of reactive firefighting, you must habitually ask, and then what? You use the 10-10-10 rule to respect the latency of consequences. You must map out the probabilities of human rebellion to avoid cobra effects. You run a pre-mortem to bypass your own optimism bias, and you keep a strict decision journal to force your intuition to align with reality over time.
There is one final structural warning from the research that governs this entire framework, the third-order justification trap.
Oh, how does that break the model?
This occurs when an individual knowingly executes a fundamentally disastrous first-order action, such as manipulating financial data, hiding safety risks, or violating core organizational logic, and rationalizes it by claiming a theoretical second or third-order benefit will balance the scales.
Like, I will alter these safety metrics today so the factory stays open tomorrow, which theoretically protects local jobs.
Precisely. It is a fatal misapplication of the model. You cannot use second-order thinking to rationalize an action that violates the basic physics or foundational integrity of your system.
Using strategic foresight as a camouflage for system violation.
Right. If the immediate action corrupts the structural baseline, the subsequent orders will only compound the corruption.
Well, we started this deep dive talking about a rat-infested farm and feral cats. The ultimate takeaway here isn't just about avoiding bad solutions, it's about fundamentally rewiring how you view cause and effect.
Absolutely.
True strategic mastery isn't about being the fastest person to react to a crisis. It's about having the discipline to sit quietly, map the probabilities, and design a system where the crisis never triggers in the first place.
This raises an important question. The next time you are handed an obvious quick fix that promises immediate relief, what hidden mechanisms will you uncover when you force yourself to look just one layer deeper?
Thank you for taking this deep dive into second-order thinking with us today. We wish you the absolute best of luck as you map out the hidden consequences of your next big decision. Keep asking, and then what? And we'll catch you next time.